Hello, today I'm going to introduce about the Chongyun Palace. Chongyun Palace was built in 1418, and actually in that time it was not named the Chongyun Palace, and it was only built to take care of King Taejong, the surviving king of King Sejong. In 1482, the three others of the former king's wives, Sejong's Queen Jeonghee, Deokjong's Queen Sohye, and Queen Ansun needed a place to live, and this place was selected for them. And after that, this place was named Chongyun Palace. Chongyun Palace, which was built in size, was established as a palace that complements the division function in the Changdeokgung Palace. Although Chongyun Palace was an independent place, it was rarely used as a palace where the king lived and saw the political affairs. This palace had a sad history. It is a history of Japanese colonial area times, and in that times, the Japan used this palace as a zoo and a botanical garden. Then let's learn about the structure and history of Chongyun Palace. Chongyun Palace was not separate from Changdeokgung Palace, and it used some part of the Changdeokgung Palace's backyard. And Chongyun Palace can be largely divided into outer place, inner place, and Chungdang sites. If you look in this map, you can see this is the outer places, and this is the inner places, and this is the Chungdang sites, which we call the backyard. In these outer places, the king usually did affairs, and in these inner places, the king or queen usually lived here or eat or slept here. And in this resting place, which was called the Jungkanji sites, the king usually rest, or also the king did farming here. It is very extraordinary that the king did farm here, and I will explain about this later. And this is the Mongjungjung Ho, one of the most prominent outer places of Chongyun Palace, and it was built in the 14th year of King Seongjong, but was destroyed during the Japanese invasion of Korea in the 8th year of King Gwanghae-gun. It is a straight one-story building with 5 bays in front space and 3 bays in side space above the two hemispheres. You can see that shape in this picture. And it is constructing with the magnificent and authoritative scale of the mid-level structure of the royal palace during the Joseon dynasty. And in the magnificent and authoritative space, the scale of the mid-level structure of the royal place, you can see the Gungjeonjeon of Gyeongbokgung Palace and the Injeonjeon of Changdeokgung Palace. If you look at that main buildings, you can see that it shows the dignity of the king. But it is very unique that this main building, is shaped like only a one-story building. And this shows why inner places were more advanced than outer places, as shown by the fact that the massive expansion during the reign of King Seongjong was for the 3 others of the former king's wives, which I mentioned already. In addition, Mongjungjung Ho is facing east, and which is different from other places. Taking into account the geographical characteristics of Baesan Imsu, it used the natural location. In this Baesan Imsu, the Baesan Imsu has a meaning that it has a great location. And in our Korean ancestry usually thought that the geographic location is very important to select the palace. This is the Tumengen Ho. Tumengen Ho is one of the central spaces of the inner places. In 1701, Jang Hae-bin, who stayed at Chongyun Palace, was found to have decorated a shrine to the west of Tumengen Ho and buried a hideous object under King Seokjong's residence, Daejeonjeon Ho, and also Tumengen Ho, which was Queen In-hyun's residence, and called in a shaman to pray for disaster every night. The queen died after a long illness because of this accident, and Jang also died under poison. This was a tragic incident derived from the power struggle between the two sides, the Norrön and Seowon in Korean wars. although it was often highlighted only by women. Tumengen Ho was built in the 15th year of King Songjeong's reign and was rebuilt during the reign of King Gwanghaegun. However, it was destroyed by fire again in 1719. The current building was built in 1833 of King Sunjo, and it is now selected treasure as number 818th. And this is the site of the Junggyeong Ho. Actually, the Junggyeong Ho was built by King Jongjo for his mother, Haegyeong Ho Shi, in 1777, the following year of his reign. The first owner of the Junggyeong Ho, of course, was the home of Haegyeong and Kim, the queen of Philippi of King Jongjo, passed on and died here. Junggyeong Ho was restored for nearly 100 years and disappeared from the ground due to a fire in the 10th year of King Gojong, which is in 1873. In 1911, the Japanese built a museum on this site, and after Korea's liberation from Japanese colonial rule, it was used as Jongseokgak and became a green area in 1992. I mentioned that Jungkanji was actually used for a resting place, right? Jungkanji is a pond in the area of Chongyun Palace's patronage. The two ponds were connected in the shape of a gourd. The pond on the upper side was the original Jungkanji, and the pond below and the surrounding area were the places where the king himself was farming. It is very interesting that the king did farms in this place. The king used to personally experience the lives of the people by planting rice and collecting them and handing them out to his servants. This site was converted into a pond by the Japanese in 1909, and during the Chongyun period and after that, Korea's liberation from Japanese colonial rule, ordinary people also enjoyed boats here. The islands and bridges in the pond were built in 1984. The glass building to the north beyond the Chungdanji is a sign of the Chongyun period, which still remains as a botanical gardens greenhouse. I mentioned the Chongyun word, right? This Chongyun word was named by the Japan because the Japan used this Chongyun place as a zoo, which I mentioned already, and that at that time it was called Chongyun. Also, if you go up to the northeast of the Chungdanji, you can see a small pavilion in the forest, which is Gwandokjeon Pavilion, where the king used to shoot arrows in that place. Junggyeong Palace is one of Korea's cultural heritage, whose appearance and role have changed the most. It was burned down a lot, and even the only palace Korea where zoos and botanical gardens were built. If you look here, you can see the zoo in the Chongyun Palace, and also in this picture, you can see the people watching the animals. And this was all happened in that Chongyun Palace. Considering that the Japanese style museum was also located in Junggyeong Ho, Chongyun Palace is a place that encompasses both modern and contemporary history of Korea. Chongyun Palace has a small number of buildings, and unlike other palaces, it is characterized by its eastward view. The structure and layout of the space were not divided into a straight line on the flat land, but the site was set up along the hills and plains without going against the high and low ground, so we can feel the history and nature of our country together. And this is my end or explanation of Chongyun Palace. You can see a lot of changes and differences starting from the Joseon history and to Daehan Empire. And in that history, you can also see that the sad history, but also there is also the good history, which was the king usually stayed here because of other palaces was burnt down. But actually, because of this a lot of history, I think this Chongyun Palace is the palace which shows our Korea. And this is my end of explanation. and thank you for listening.